Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Analytics with Arjun. Didn't have my episode last week. We're back this week. The Chargers coming off two straight dubs, heading into their bye week. Pretty banged up, I would say. Obviously, Herbert got hurt. You have Bosa, Derwin, Eckler, all missing time. But going into the bye week, I think they've performed well enough to be 2-2, especially on offense, which we'll get into today. So, like I said, since there is no game or no opponent to scout for this week, we're going to be doing what NFL teams do during their bye week, which is we're going to self scout the Chargers. Now, we only have 4 weeks of data. We don't really want to draw too many conclusions, I think, from the data that we have, and we don't want to make too many predictions. I think, based on a small sample size of data, we're only really looking at maybe 160 to 180 plays for the Chargers. And we're obviously filtering out garbage time and some red zone stuff, but I think it is important just to look at where their offense is right now, how their defense is, what's been working for them, what's not been working. Are there any tendencies that the Chargers have on offense that other teams could potentially pick up on? So we're going to be using, like I said, my scouting tool that I created called the Scout. You can find it on my Twitter. It's the pin tweet at ArjunMenon100. But yeah, we're really just going to go through this scouting tool together. So first off, let's look at the Chargers' offensive overview. So currently they're fourth in EPA per play. Remember, EPA stands for expected points added. Basically, it's a better version. It weights yards relative to how many points we'd expect the offense to get. So basically, you're putting a point value on the outcome of a play. So it is one of the best measures of team performance, I think, out there. So they rank fourth offensively in EPA per play. They rank seventh in offensive success rate. And then you break down EPA by run and pass. They're fourth in EPA per pass. They're 15th in EPA per rush, but their EPA per rush is negative, while their EPA per pass is 0.2. They're sixth in pass rate over expected. So basically, given the contextual factors of the game, how likely is it that the Chargers were expected to pass and how many times did they actually pass? So currently the Chargers are passing about 3.79% more than expected, which is good, ranked top sixth. They are 10th in explosive rate. They have an explosive play, which means 15 or more yards gained, regardless of run or pass. They have an explosive play on about 10.3% of their plays, and their early down EPA per play, which is predictive and descriptive, they rank fifth. So overall, pretty good across the board. Their rush attack is the only one where they've struggled a little bit, especially after that first game. You probably take that first game away, and then the bottom five, just like last year. But you lose your best rusher in Austin Eckler. I'm not too surprised by them dropping down to 15th after being probably number one after week one. So, but overall, really enjoyed watching this offense. I think Kellen Moore has done a pretty good job, and we'll get into some more of the specifics behind this offense as we go through it. As you can see, there is no blue highlight, so I like to highlight blue things as if they are a tendency. Is no big blue highlight for any of the Chargers run pass splits by down. So they run and pass similar to the league average on every single down. Their pass rate over expected on first down is 7.41%, which is good. Again, we want Herbert to be throwing the ball as often as possible until maybe the game gets out of hand, and then yes, chew the clock with your run game. If we break down run pass splits by down and distance, again, like there aren't a lot of things I think that show that Kellen Moore's calling a predictable offense like Joe Lombardi was last year. You can see their run pass splits by down and distance with any down and distance that has a large sample size. So at least in 4 games, a large sample size would be at least like 5 plays. Even though that's a pretty small sample size, I would still say that's a large enough sample size through 4 games. The only big tendencies is he throws the ball a lot of the time on 3rd and 3 through 6, or on 3rd and 3 yards or more, they're throwing the ball with, but that's what every team would do. So pretty good job by Kellen Moore. No big run pass tendency when you look at down and distance. If we look at how the Chargers have performed out of certain offensive formations, they're pretty good, running plays out of shotgun, right? Currently they're 8th in EPA from shotgun. They're 10th in success rate. So top 10 offense when top 10 offense out of shotgun when compared to other teams in the league. They're also running shotgun about 62% of the time. They have the 8th highest explosive rate out of shotgun. The only, negative thing is they're about a league average team running out of shotgun, but I'm not too worried about that. What I am worried about is the Chargers cannot throw the ball from under center. Now, typically, when you're under center, you can see it in this next table. The Chargers run about 65% of the time from under center, and most of their dropbacks from under center are going to be play action. Now, this is concerning, right? Herbert's been, I think, one of the better play action QBs in the league. The Chargers typically rank top 10 in terms of play action usage under Joe Lombardi. But this year, the Chargers ranked currently 26th in EPA per play. They're averaging negative 0.3 expected points added per play. So basically, every time Herbert drops back from under center, the offense is losing about 0.3 points per drop back. They also rank 27th in success rate from under center, and they have about a 35% success rate. So throughout the formations, you can see like there's a lot of green. They're pretty good running plays when Herbert's not under center, but under center, I think he has struggled a little bit, which is a little bit different than what we've seen in years past. Again, no big run pass tendency from offensive formation. I guess the biggest one is when they're under center. It's about a 65% run rate. Interestingly, out of pistol, it's also about a 64-36% run pass split. So that's kind of interesting. I would kind of expect maybe Herbert to throw the ball a little bit more out of pistol, but they really go to shotgun and empty if they want to throw the ball. There's no big run pass split by offensive formation and down. I wouldn't even say there's a big run pass split in terms of formation and down and distance. So we're just going to skip past that. And looking at the Chargers offensive personnel efficiency. So you can see they really live out of 11 and 12. They're not a team that mixes up personnel very often. They run 11 personnel about 53% of the time, and they run 12 personnel about 36% of the time. And obviously, again, as a note, a lot of these tables, except for the first table and the player stats table, will filter out red zone, 2-minute, and garbage time, just because those aren't things that typically coaches like to see. So again, this is made as if I'm presenting to a coach. So I'm only looking at the -99 to the +13, and then no 2-minute, no garbage time. So there might be some plays where they've gone, heavier than 13. They might have gone 14 or something, but we're only looking at those filters that I talked about. So you can see again, they're really good running the ball, running plays out of 12 personnel. They have the 5th best EPA per play overall out of 12. They're the 5th best EPA per pass out of 12. They're also a top 10, and then you look at 11 personnel, they're a top 10 run offense out of 11 personnel. And this was something that it was probably one of the smart guys from the Ringer, like Ben Solak or Steven Ruiz, that talked about it. But the Chargers, under Kellen Moore, they're going to want to run 11 personnel, and you need to be able to run the ball out of 11 to get defenses out of those too high shells, so it makes it easier to pass. And currently, the Chargers this year rank 9th in terms of EPA per rush out of 12 personnel, out of 11 personnel, which is great. And hopefully that continues. But overall, their two main personnel packages, they are pretty much a top 10 offense in both personnel. So that's definitely something we love to see. In terms of run pass splits rep personnel, this one's kind of obvious, but they throw the ball about 86% of the time. They've thrown the ball 6 out of 7 times when in 10 personnel, and they've run the ball 6 out of 7 times when in 13 personnel. And again, this is not in the low red zone. So when they go 13, it's most likely going to be a run, but they don't have 3 good tight ends. So this is why they've only run 7 plays in 4 games out of 13. Just looking at run pass splits by personnel and offensive formation. Again, no blue, which means there's no big tendency. So good job for Kellen Moore for that. Here's where we get a little bit of blue. Just looking at the run pass splits by personnel and down and distance. So they have run 5 plays on 1st and 10 from 13 personnel. They've run the ball 4 out of those 5 plays. And then if we look at 2nd and 7 through 9, which is, kind of a 2nd and medium / long. They've run 13 plays out of 11 personnel. They've thrown the ball on 12 of those 13 plays. But when they've come out in 12 personnel, they've run the ball on 4 out of 5 plays in 2nd and 7 through 9. So in that 2nd and medium and long, it kind of depends on the personnel, but that personnel can dictate if they're going to run or pass the ball on the upcoming play. And then let's just look at the Chargers and how they've performed against certain defensive things, you can say. So the main, I would say 3 or 4 numbers of defender of the box you want to focus on. 5 defenders in the box, 6 defenders, 7 defenders. Those make up the majority of the plays. And then you can look at 8, but that's really, I would say, kind of those goal, like those short yardage situations. So let's just focus on 6 and 7, honestly, because that's where we see a huge difference. When the defense puts 6 defenders in the box, the Chargers have the 3rd best EPA, 8th best success rate. They're the 3rd best team at throwing the ball. They're the 4th best team at running the ball, and then they have the 5th highest explosive rate. So when teams kind of play light boxes, the Chargers are really good. Like they've been really good on offense this year. But when when teams have brought that extra defender into the box, when they have 7 defenders in the box, the Chargers for some reason are just terrible. Like they're not good. They have the 25th best EPA. They have the 27th best success rate. They're a bottom 10th team throwing the ball. They're weirdly league average at running the ball, and they have the 5th worst explosive play rate. So again, this is something teams might pick up on since the Chargers are coming out of their bye week. But when teams are kind of playing light boxes, the Chargers have been able to dominate passing and running. And then when teams bring that extra defender into the box, that's where the Chargers have struggled the most this year. Just looking at how the Chargers have done against certain DB packages, they're the best offense in the league against base, which is great. You want to take advantage of having that 3rd linebacker on the field. Chargers rank first in EPA per play, 2nd in success rate, 1st in EPA per rush. They're the best team at running the ball against base defenses. I don't think I would have ever expected that from the Chargers, given how their rush attack has been the last couple of years. But that is a great sight to see. They're also I'd say relatively good offense against nickel. They're 8th in EPA per play, but 17th in success rate, which kind of just means I think they're hitting on big plays more often than not. And they have struggled a little bit against dime defenses, which I'm not too surprised. I think given that the Chargers receivers are okay, but not great, especially now without Mike Williams. I could see them struggling a little bit when there's more actual coverage players on the field instead of, a second linebacker. So some interesting takeaways here. I don't really know how many times the Chargers are going to face base defense for the rest of the season, but just thought that was interesting to look at. I don't really think we need to look at defensive personnel. Looking at the Chargers versus pass rushers, when teams just rush 4, which has happened about 59% of the time, the Chargers have the 6th best EPA per play, the 9th best success rate, 8th highest explosive play rate. So really good across the board when teams are just rushing 4. When teams rush 5, kind of like a borderline top 10 offense, 11th in EPA, 10th in success rate. And then when teams rush 6, the Chargers are 8th in EPA, 14th in success rate, and 10th in explosive play rate. And then overall, when teams blitz the Chargers are kind of just above league average. They're 11th in EPA, 15th in success rate, and then 14th in explosive play rate. So I think the Chargers can take care of business whether teams blitz them or not. I posted a graph on Twitter today showing Justin Herbert's kind of in that top right quadrant in terms of how he's done his efficiency versus the blitz and versus non-blitzes. So I think the Chargers are good, and I don't think they're struggling as much as they were against the blitz last year. Then just looking at the run game tendencies, the Chargers have done exceptionally well running the ball between the left tackle and left guard. So running behind Slater and Zion, running to Slater's outside shoulder, which is this left end gap. They have 18 rushes in those 2 gaps, and they're both above league average. The Chargers are basically averaging about like a 60, somewhere between a 60% and 70% success rate. I would say they've been successful basically on 6 out of their 9 rushes between the Slater and Johnson gap. So, run more to that left side. That is why you move Zion Johnson from right guard to left guard, is because that's his natural position. And more runs to the left side would be great, especially considering they've not done a good job running the ball to the right side of that offensive line. And runs right up the middle, which include, QB sneaks or those halfback dives. They have been less successful than the league average. And then just looking at how that kind of stacks up EPA per play wise, it's interesting. Like the Chargers also have done pretty well running the ball outside Trey Pipkins' right shoulder. You can see they have a really high EPA per play on those rushes, which means they're either hitting on a lot of big plays out there, or those are some of those high leverage situations. So running more outside the tackles, that seems to be what's working. Running between Lindsley and the guards doesn't really seem to be working as well this season. And then to finish it off, just looking at the Chargers pass game tendencies, Herbert is throwing the ball the most to the right, to his right, between 1 to 9 yards, so in that short passing length, and he's throwing the ball, left also at a similar rate. And you can see it's a lot of green. He hasn't really struggled a lot at throwing to any part of the field. The only part of the field he's really struggled the most at is that left intermediate, so that 10 to 19 range. There's kind of ranking in the bottom 8 in terms of EPA and success rate, but he only has 8 passes there, and he's only throwing there about 5% of the time. So I'm not too worried about that, but just something to take note of. And then just looking at, how the Chargers have kind of lined up everyone, obviously with Eckler back, the running back stuff will change, but Kelly is kind of the main guy in that department. Donald Parham is the guy they use when they go to 12 personnel. He has the most snaps actually in 12 personnel. And interestingly enough, I think when the Chargers go 12, it's a chance for Kellen Moore and Kevin Koger to give Gerald Everett a breather. You can see Donald Parham actually has more snaps out of 12 than Gerald Everett, which means I think they like to rotate Everett out and bring in Smart and McKitty. And I would have to look into the numbers, but I would guess this is mainly on run plays. They're going to keep Everett in if it's 12 and they're passing, but if it's 12 and they're running, you take Everett out, give them a breather, and get one of these tight ends to block. But side note, both of them suck at run blocking. So, I don't really know if the rest and the drop off is worth it. Okay. Let's just quickly move on to the defense. And I don't really want to talk too much about them because this defense is not very good so far. You can see just with their defensive overview, just a lot of red. Their bottom 8 defense in terms of EPA, success rate, EPA per pass allowed. They have the fourth highest explosive rate allowed, which is bad. And they, just can't. They're letting offenses stay ahead of the sticks basically on early downs. In terms of the defensive personnel, their most used defensive personnel is the 4-2-5, so 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, basically their standard nickel package. And then they also really like to use this 5-2-4 front. So when they go base, 5 down linemen, or you have your 3 tackles / nose tackles, and then you have Bosa, Mack, or Thule and Rumph standing up on the outside. So 4-2-5, 5-2-4, 2-4-5 are their 3 main defensive personnel packages. They run 4-2-5 the most often, regardless of down. Even on first down, they'll use their 4-2-5 look more than their 5-2-4 look, which kind of makes sense. You typically nickel is the new base, right? So you're not going to run base all that often on first down. Just looking at their defensive back usage and efficiency, I feel like they're running base a lot more. Like, I think it's visible also. They've been running base on about 28% of their plays and nickel on 65% of their plays. As you can see in the table, it's a lot of red, which means they're not efficient. They're allowing offenses to do whatever they want, regardless of how many defensive backs are on the field. Out of base, they rank 27th in terms of EPA per play allowed. Out of nickel, they rank 26th in terms of EPA per play allowed. So again, they're not really finding much success in either. And then the worst thing is, out of nickel, they rank 29th in explosive play rate. When you have more DBs on the field, they're just allowing more explosive plays. And then out of dime, they've allowed an explosive play on 27% of their plays, which ranks 22nd. It's just like explosive plays are killing the Chargers right now. And that's, I think, has to be the biggest fix going into the bye week. Like I said, with Staley, nickel is the new base. They're using nickel the most, regardless of down. And this is where it gets interesting, right? When teams go into 12 personnel, they've matched 12 personnel with base rather than nickel. So they faced 32 snaps of 12 personnel from opposing offenses. They've used base on 24 of those 32 snaps. So about 75% of their 75% of the time when opposing offenses have gone into 12, they match it with a third linebacker. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing. They've also played offenses like Tennessee, where you want to get that extra linebacker on to kind of stop Derrick Henry. But you have to really ask yourself if this is the trade-off worth it, because base, you're obviously more liable against the pass. Out of 13 and 21, the Chargers also like to match. They also like to match 13 and 21 with base more often than nickel. And then if we go down here to the Chargers pass rusher usage, you can see they don't, blitz too often, or, it's a mixed bag. Like they kind of blitz, they kind of don't. For the most part, they're rushing four. They rush four about 67% of the time. They're not very effective when doing it. When they've rushed four, it, I say they're not effective, but it kind of goes both ways, right? So they have the second highest sack rate when rushing four. That's great. Like when if you can get home with only rushing four, that's amazing. But the problem is they have the third highest explosive play rate allowed. So again, it all comes back to allowing explosive plays. And it's interesting because Brandon Staley's philosophy is you don't allow explosive plays, but that's the problem of the Chargers. They can have the second highest sack rate, but it doesn't matter if you can turn a 2nd and 8 into a 3rd and 17 when you allow a 20-yard completion on 3rd and 17. So, having a high sack rate, great, love it, but got to bring down that explosive play rate. It's even higher when they add a fifth rusher. So, again, their problem, I think, is just allowing too many explosive plays. They have allowed an explosive play on 25% of their blitzes with at least 5 pass rushers. So that's something that, again, has to change going into the bye week. You can see they blitz at an above average rate on 1st and 2nd down. On 3rd down, they like to play a little bit more coverage. They rank 20th in terms of blitz rate. They blitz about 30% of the time on 3rd down. And then you can see they have the highest like blitz rate out of dime, but it's only 14 dropbacks, so not too big of a takeaway. And you can see Staley's light box philosophy here. They rank 24th in terms of average number of defenders in the box on all downs. And if we just look at the Chargers defense run game tendency, they've struggled the most at stopping runs between the tackle and guard. You can see that those are the two biggest discrepancies from the Chargers defensive success rate allowed versus the NFL league average success rate allowed. And in terms of EPA, I mean, it's huge. Like when teams run between their left tackle and left guard, the Chargers are allowing like about a 0.4 EPA per rush. So every time they run between that gap, the offense is gaining about 0.4 points on those plays. So that's, kind of an interior defensive line problem. I don't think Austin Johnson and Spasso Joseph-Day have been all that great this year. So I think, Thule and Khalil Mack have done a great job kind of limiting some of those end runs. But between the tackle and guard, I think there's a lot of improvement that needs to be made. Okay. I don't know how long that was. Hopefully that wasn't too long. But again, this was just a typical soft scout of the Chargers. And to kind of recap it, and Kellen Moore has done a great job. He doesn't really have any big tendencies that he's shown. He does a good job of mixing up 11 and 12 personnel. They've been able to be efficient in 12 out of 11 and 12 personnel. And then on defense, it really just comes down to stopping explosive plays. The Chargers are still number 1 in terms of explosive plays allowed this year. And again, given Brandon Staley's philosophy, that really shouldn't be the case. But hopefully with this bye week, they're able to turn it around. And with games against the Cowboys and the Chiefs coming up, I mean, they're really going to need to be on, they need to be focused on defense because those are two very, very good offenses with some very good quarterbacks. But I want to thank everyone for listening to this video today. Hope everyone's had a chance to check out my scouting tool, which you can find on my Twitter. But if not, no worries. Obviously that's why I'm making the videos to show people how it can be used. But again, thanks everyone for listening. And until next time, bolts up.